This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Mike Collins. Once a month, Mayor Vi Lyles is on the program. We have a lot to talk about today, from the status of the city's business recovery plans in the middle of this pandemic to the economic impact of no fans in the Panthers stands to an issue many cities are struggling with, policing. So let's get right to it. Welcome back to the program, Mayor Lyles.
Thanks for having me, Mike, and good morning to all of your listeners.
Good morning. This has been a summer of unrest, as everybody knows who's been watching television and listening to radio and reading the newspaper. Charlotte's been involved in some of this. One of the things that many cities have in common is the growing frustration some people feel about police and the official response about police in cities and in police departments to demands for change. So as you look, before we get into the particulars and get down to the local level, just the 30,000-foot view, what is your take on what we've been witnessing around the country?
I think that the take has been that for a number of years, we've been not able to really see the impact of policing in African American communities, particularly as it results for African American men. And now that we have the ability, social media has made all of the difference in the world around this. I believe that, for example, CMPD, our department, they work really hard at community relations. They spend a lot of time making sure that they understand the needs of all of our communities. But there have been some areas across this country that perhaps are not as current in their thinking and what they do as CMPD is. And so what I think we are seeing is people are taking the responsibility to film, to put on social media acts that have been reprehensible, and that you're seeing that and people are reacting to it.
Well, CMPD is not without fault. Here in Charlotte during the summer's protests in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd, police bottlenecked protesters, as you well know, on June 2nd on 4th Street. They closed the entry points and the exit points so they could then fire pepper spray and tear gas on them. It was all recorded by Queen City Nerve. That tape made it look like a premeditated event. CMP denied that it was, but then body cam footage was released featuring comments that countered that statement.
Rory's got a platoon on Tryon, out of sight. Dancer's platoon on stage now on College, out of sight. We're going to push their ass straight up 4th. As soon as they get up on 4th, because we got a bottleneck now, Rory's squad is going to step out and hammer their ass.
What was your reaction when you heard that?
You know, my reaction was just like the public's reaction. That is not the way that we respect the people in this community that are protesting. And the reaction that our police chief, Johnny Jennings, who has now been at this for several weeks, he said that this is not appropriate. That officer has been disciplined and has significant consequences as the disciplinary action. And so what I see when we talk about these protests and what we're doing, there are going to be some times that we have the merger of what we have as prior behavior and behavior that's expected and changed. So working with Chief Jennings, I believe that Charlotte's Police Department is undergoing a thorough review. And at the end of the day, we changed the policy that we would no longer have that type of formation as people were protesting, that we looked at the languaging and how do we de-escalate and use language instead of the yelling and the screaming, and we're going to do this. How do we talk differently about what needs to be done? So the best thing about all of us, when we make a mistake, we acknowledge it and we fix it. And that's what we're doing. I have to just add that we are in an extensive review around police reform being led by Larkin Eggleston and the Safe Communities Committee. And they have a community discussion group made up of activists, not people that are just, I want to be informed, but people that have a point of view that perhaps will not be reflective of what we would see in our police department. We need to hear what they're saying, incorporate that in our policies. I'm looking forward to our draft Safe Communities plan that we're going to have on October the 5th.
I want to go back to what you said a minute ago about the officer we just heard in that piece, in that recording. He was a police sergeant. He was suspended for 2 weeks. He's also prohibited from being eligible for certain promotions for 2 years. So yes, he was disciplined. I'm not sure why, however. He was simply relating a plan that he knew about to fellow officers. And I've never heard if the officer who constructed the plan has been disciplined. Has that officer been disciplined?
Let's say that, just like I've never been in the military, and so I do not know all of how chain of command works, but there are tactics that were used and a formation that was used, and that has been clearly accepted that the former police chief, Kerr Putney, authorized this action, and that the action by the officer that was disciplined actually occurred minutes before that formation. And that officer, I think, exhibited exactly what I think the chief said, that we are not trying to escalate action, we're trying to de-escalate. And so while the video makes it seem like everything was pushed in together, the bicycle line was closer to McDowell and Fifth Street, whereas the tactic that was used, the formation and the military formation that we used was at College and 4th Street. The thing that's important here is that we have looked at the police force and we've allowed not just the idea that you can do military tactics, but we've forgotten that our job is to protect sometimes more often than to discourage or interfere with protesting. And that's what we're trying to do. I think Chief Jennings is capable. I think our department understands this. And certainly the Charlotte City Council is looking into it in greater detail, not because something happened that was illegal but something happened that undermine the trust that the community has in CMPD. We've got to fix that.
It's a long answer to a question, but not to my question. And my question was, has the person responsible been disciplined? And what I think I heard you say is that Chief Putney is responsible for the decision to corral those people on 4th Street on June 2nd. That was his decision. It was department policy. I'm still curious as to why an officer relating the information to fellow officers would be disciplined at all. Why at all?
Well,
He
I
was
think
just
that
talking. He maybe used some inappropriate words in a public conversation, but it wasn't a public conversation. It was a private conversation.
when you're a public employee, when you speak in uniform as a part of a response, you're on duty. You have to have the conduct that you would expect on duty. I know there are many people that would say away from this, if he had not been there, if he had done this in his private life, that would have been one thing. But you have a duty to respond and act.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I know you're not the police chief, so you're not the one making these decisions. But what I'm hearing you say is that former Chief Putney gave the go-ahead for this activity, and Chief Jennings, the new chief, has said that police policy was in fact followed. But given the negative reaction to that incident and how it's been handled, is that still the policy? And should it still be the policy, or has it been changed?
So let me say that I don't think that what Chief Jennings did was react to the negative part of it. Certainly, we all understand that it was reacted to negatively. But what I think he actually analyzed was this a type of action or formation that would work in our city. And the corrections are that we would not do that, so that people would not understand, that protesters would have the ability to go and understand that the police would actually inform protesters that this has now become less of a peaceful protest, and it's become a place where we're going to ask you to disperse, and we will never cut off a dispersal route. That's what he changed. So it was
Okay.
the idea that we had a formation that did not work correctly, communication, the placement of some of the riot control devices, all of that just didn't work that night. But Chief Jennings has said that we will change that. And so those changes are now on the city's webpage. You can go in and see. We will always have two ways that people can disperse, that we will and tell them how long they have to disperse. We will also look at it and say, do we have to do this order right now? I think Chief Jennings has taken a really solid approach to this.
So CMPD policies governing chemical agents and dispersal orders were also revised as a result of that incident in June. City Council prohibited the purchase of any additional chemical agents through the end of the fiscal year that we are in now, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, ends on June 30th, 2021. But pepper spray was used on protesters on several occasions. On August 24th during the Republican National Convention. What is the protocol now on the use of chemical agents during protests in Charlotte, and are they substantial? Are those rules substantially different than they were prior to the June 2nd incident?
So what I think that you're going to see is the Safe Communities Committee of Council is now looking at chemical agents and how they're used and what is the protocol. Right now, if you use pepper spray or any other riot control air device, that is just like pulling your gun out of your holster. They're looked at as lethal weapons. What we do in the future will be informed by public input, will be informed by people that are actually looking at this across the country. You know, Mike, all of this is something that we're being asked to turn on, I wouldn't say a dime, but to turn around and review and examine. We are fully committed to this. We are committed to looking at what do we do to make sure that people believe that they can call CMPD, that CMPD is there to help and protect. And so I think we've got a long haul here, and we're working really hard on all of these policies. So it would be great if at some level we would have a national policy around how police should be put work with our democracy. That's not going to happen. So we're going to do it on our own in Charlotte.
Does the fact that you say you're being asked to essentially turn on a dime and that these things take time, that policy changes and shifts take time, explain what happened during the RNC? Because again, video from a photojournalist, this time from the Observer, shows two people being directly targeted by an officer using pepper spray as they approached an injured woman trying to help her. And this was not an isolated incident. The paper reports several incidents of police targeting peaceful demonstrators with pepper spray while they were not engaged in violence. That's no longer the city's position, I would assume. So why did that happen?
Well, let me say this. I read the article like you have that you described, and it talks about that in their photos. I don't know what happened before the photos were taken, and the chief is going to be looking at each one of those. We want to be responsive to complaints that we have, but we also want to be responsive to our policies and review. So as we look at this, and that article gave everybody pause, but it gives, more importantly, pause to how do we train, how do we conduct ourselves as CMPD. And that's why we have the leadership that's really sitting down and thinking through this. As you say, I don't know what happened on those streets. I can read those articles, but there are going to be people that are going to call people into
Let me stop you. I'm stopping.
conversation.
I have to stop. It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and First Citizens Bank. For over 120 years, First Citizens has been committed to helping families and businesses handle the financial ups and downs life brings. More at firstcitizens.com. Forever First, member FDIC. And the Fresh Market, proudly serving Charlotte with hundreds of organics, plus curated and local ingredients, grill-ready entrees, and prepared meals. Details at neighborhood stores and thefreshmarket.com. We have spoken frequently on this program with the mayor, in fact, about the challenges to find and build and maintain affordable housing here. But now there's a grassroots effort underway taking a different approach. Community activist Greg Jackson founded the group Heal Charlotte to mentor kids, reduce violence, and provide rental assistance. But now he has embarked on a campaign to raise $10 million to buy a hotel to turn it into affordable housing. And we hear more about that from him tomorrow at 9.
We now know much more about how our universe began 13.8 billion years ago. But is as much attention being paid to how it's all going to end? For those worried about making it past November, astrophysicist Katie Mack will provide us with some cosmological context. We talk about the end of everything next time on 1A.
1A from 10 to noon after Charlotte Talks on 90.7 WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source.
It's Charlotte Talks on listener funded 90.7 WFAE and 90.3 WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're talking with Mayor Vi Lyles this morning about a number of things. We've started off with policing. We'll move on to other things in a moment or two. I had to interrupt you for the break. Do you want to finish what you were saying, Mayor Lyles, before I move on?
Well, Mike, I think that we have to do so much work as we look at reform in the police department. I think we need some help from the national government about what's acceptable, because we need to do this in a way that people know what the expectations are. The police officers expect that and want that. But when we are talking about what's going on in Charlotte, we're up to 84 homicides. And while we are doing this reform work, we also have to start talking about what we're going to do in our own community to stop people from harming each other, killing each other. And I worry more about that. I shouldn't say more. I think what I'm saying is that my empathy, my belief that people that are 14 and 15 and 16, 17 years old having guns and resolving disputes with weapons that kill each other. I guess I've worked long enough in government to know that you can change policies, you can train people to do things, but when you can't control what's going on in the streets, and we're struggling with this, and I guess that's the difficult part for me.
One of the things that former Chief Putney spoke about many times, and I think Johnny Jennings has spoken about this too, is that when incidents like you're talking about, these homicides take place, there are people in the community who may have information about what happened and who perpetrated the crime, and they won't come forward because of a trust issue between them and the police. And what we're seeing on the streets around the country is an illustrative of the breaking of that trust. I mean, why should anybody trust the police department if they can't be trusted to treat peaceful protesters appropriately? And there are even people on city council who have taken issue with how CMPD has handled situations with peaceful protesters. I mean, Braxton Winston on Facebook accused the police department of lying about a certain incident where he says, where police say they were shoved off a bicycle. He says, no, you plowed into people with your bicycle. He says you're lying.
The reason that we have to put some trust into the people that serve in this community is because when we're talking about protesting, that's one thing. But when you're talking about you don't have someone to talk to in your neighborhood because you feel like you're a victim of domestic violence, we have over 2,000 officers working in the city. And yes, we can talk about peaceful protesting, and we are talking about that policy. But when you are talking about someone that's dealing drugs on your street, that you're having a fight with, or you're having domestic violence, where do you go if you don't turn to the person that has been walking the streets of your neighborhood for?
But that's my point. That's my point, Mayor. And Braxton Winston, as we have been speaking, was on Facebook and posted this. He said, I know what happened. CMPD lied. They are out of control. If that is the perception, that the police are out of control in certain communities, in this community and around the country, why would you call the police?
I think that Mr. Winston and I have conversations often about this. And I think the one thing that he brings to the table is the perspective of those that are in the streets doing this. But I also think that the people that I see that live on in certain communities, they also bring a perspective to me. And that perspective to me is that we need to have policing in our community. We need to have someone to talk to that is a police officer that can help calm and change. What the council approved last night is our first step on violence interruption, using people in the community to work on acknowledging where there are disputes that are small that will escalate, and working with the police department to do this. So I understand that people have fear, but fears can be for a number of reasons. And people that live in certain communities, they're not protesting. What they're afraid of people in their community or people in their neighborhood or household. And we can't make it, it's not a simple thing. We have to work on everything. All of these things require different strategies, and we are working on both of those things.
And all of these require trust, two-way trust in the police, that we have to believe the police are going to operate in our self-interest and not do things that are unnecessarily harmful to the public. And the people and the police have to trust when they go into these communities, any community, they go on any call, that you will act as a citizen responsibly. Joel, and that leads us to transparency. Because you said that the police policy is under review, and I'm curious as to how transparent that policy review will be. And Joel on Twitter writes, if CMPD is so transparent, why haven't they released the expenditures of the $50 million federal grant as promised by Chief Putney?
That will be released. So I'm not quite sure when, but Joel, if you'll let us know, if Mike can send that to us, we'll make sure that you get the date of that release. That was it wasn't the 50 million because we didn't have a full convention. We only had a partial convention. So it's likely not to be the $50 million, but we can get that information to you. But as I say, you talk about trust and transparency. We have a problem in this country around trust. But what we're trying to do in Charlotte is that we are working with an organization called Cure Violence. And this organization is built around the idea that we have to provide trust, not just in policing, but in services, that we have to make sure that people see places that are clean, that the streets are operating, that housing is available. So, in some ways, we live in a tumultuous time, and we can talk about a lot of this. What I appreciate about this community is that when we have said that we're going to do something, we're all about trying to fix it. And we have to make sure, first and foremost, that people have trust not just in police, but in every other aspect of government, that we say that if we're going to do housing, we're building affordable housing, that when we say that you need social services, that there'll be someone there, that when you need mental health services, that will happen. And Cure Violence is the kind of organization that does basically a street by street, block by block analysis of what people are feeling. And we're trying to dive into that, working with individuals to say, what is it that you think works and what doesn't work? And then to identify that and to ask those neighborhood leaders, the neighborhood people that are in the neighborhoods to come in and say, this is where we need to build trust. So this isn't something that's going to happen in a day. And it's not going to happen just because it's posted on social media. This is the hard work of government, and we're out there doing it. Today, we're going to be going out on Beatties Ford Road, knocking on doors, and we're going to be asking people to complete their canvas form. And we're going to ask them to vote, and we're going to ask them to participate in changing our corridors. And we're going to start with Beatties Ford Road. We're going to move to West Boulevard. We're going to move to Sugar Creek. These are things that are an investment of human capital, and that's where we've got to start. I wish most of all for our community to be a leader in efforts that address the people's needs, not just the needs of the loudest, not just the needs of the people that have already been successful, but the people in this community that need a decent place to live, a job that they can have, and a possibility that they can raise their families. And what we have to do is start with those people to build trust. So trust isn't a day, it's not like I, clock in, let me have some trust here. Trust is about showing up, listening, and doing. And if anything that I have seen among the elected officials in this city, in this county, is the willingness to have those conversations. We are having very difficult conversations, and we're doing it in a way that I believe transforms and builds trust. And it's important to us. And we're open to the idea of what to do better and best. And that's why we're bringing in people that have done things like this in other cities, other places. I know that as mayor of the city, it only works if we're all working and pulling in a direction. It doesn't mean that we're going to get it all right, but we're going to do our very best to get it in the place that people in this community understand that we're trying.
Mayor Vi
That's
Lyles is our guest. I want to move on to other topics, but before I do, let me share with you a couple of things about this topic that have come in while we've been talking. From Jeff, please ask when we can expect the second community forum on the lawn of the government center, which was canceled due to weather back in June and never rescheduled. It was about CMPD's actions regarding the Kettling incident and questions that still need answering.
We're talking about doing that in early October.
Okay. On Facebook, here's a simple solution from Siobhan, who says, why don't the police use the same tactics they do in white communities that they do in black communities? The police do not act the same way in white communities as they do in black communities. To tell us otherwise is an insult to our intelligence.
I would not say I'm going to tell you otherwise. I will tell you that what we've had in the white communities and something that we're trying to address is that we have had so many guns stolen out of cars that were not necessarily even locked. One incident that the chief talked about in his last review, that there was a car that was unlocked with 8 guns in it. Now, everybody contributes to making a community safe, and it's not about what's happening just because of race. It's about what you're doing as an individual. And again, this goes back to the idea that we all have to pull forward together. We can't buy these guns and leave them laying around so that people can take them and cause harm.
But you just turned it around. That comment from Siobhan was about police conduct in different neighborhoods and how they act differently. And you turned it around to citizens leaving guns in their car. That doesn't answer her question.
Well, I would say that we respond to those areas that if you look actually, and this is something that we're going to do, Siobhan, I would like for you to take a look at our new dashboard that we're creating that talks about where violence is happening. It's going to be on our website, and I hope that you'll look at it and you'll be able to see where police are responding and the types of cases that they're responding to. And you'll be able to understand, I believe, what we're doing in addition to the police response. So it's on the city's website, and it's the Community Violence Data Dashboard. And you'll be able to see how we're responding, how police responds, and where we're having the most activity that requires those responses.
So let's leave this topic on an up note. Annette on Facebook says we have a good relationship with our police department. CMPD does not represent what is happening on a national level. Would you agree with that before I move on?
Well, this is what I would say. Every night when I go home, I watch the national news. And I see how difficult, I know Lovely, who's the mayor of Rochester. I know many of these mayors, and everybody's having a tough time. This is happening nationwide. And my hope and my prayer every day after seeing what's nationally being done is that we will take every strategy, every opportunity to do something in Charlotte that keeps people involved and engaged in the outcomes. So we need people. We need people to believe in us enough that they will continue to participate with us. I don't know what it means in terms of reforming police policies. I think that there are a number of them that we will be reforming. I also think that the ideas of having to change traffic and having to change mental health services are going to be very important to police reform and moving those costs out of the police budget to where we can have more effective use. But I also believe that we have to have a level of law enforcement in a city. The level of law enforcement that we need is based on an agreement between the citizens and our police department that we're going to do this to keep people safe and well and from harm in our city.
You just answered a question from another one of our listeners, Caitlin, who had a question about defunding the police. And by that, she does not mean taking all their money away. What she means is taking some of the money and putting it in places that you just talked about, greater mental health services and things like that, so that police are not the only ones responding to tricky situations about which they have little to no expertise. Let's move on to the COVID-19 and the impact of it on Charlotte. What is your assessment of how our local economy is doing right now and how quickly we can recover once we move from the governor's phase 2.5 to either phase 3 or a full opening of the economy?
If I knew what the economy was going to do, I'd write a book and I wouldn't be sitting in this chair probably. I think that what we're seeing in North Carolina and in Charlotte is that we're seeing our lower rates of COVID from all of our testing. All of the metrics that we are using ours are in a good space. Until we have a vaccine, and you've heard the latest news on the vaccine, that what was promised has been stopped and paused until it can follow the science. Hasn't that always been our
At least
mantra,
with
to follow the science?
With one drug company, AstraZeneca.
Well, I think there was a letter signed by 8 or 9
Yes,
executives that said that we will do this the right way. And so I hope that that's what we're going to continue to do. But what I would tell you most importantly is that our numbers are good. We're seeing people wearing their masks. We are seeing that we have, actually, we had a council meeting last night, and it was the first time that we had 6-foot separation and masks being worn in a meeting. And so we have gone to the 25 people. Where I think we continue to struggle and see the greatest need is in businesses that are opening. We have already expensed or will expense in the next several weeks $30 million in grants to businesses that are local to our community. We're now working on a program specifically, the council agreed to look at the restaurant industry, to look at our hotel industry, and to look at our music venue industry. And so you will see something, we will be coming back and continuing to work on that. Charlotte took the federal money that was CARES money, and 50% of it, $70 million, went immediately to the community. And we're now doing an assessment to see what's available, what's left, and where is the greatest need. So there have been some comments by the council and some suggestions, but we all know the need is out there. We have a deadline of December to get that money out, and we are working on that every day.
We'll come back and talk more about that and about the $1 million of CARES Act funding that the council proposed to put for Wi-Fi access or Wi-Fi hotspots for CMS students when we come back. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Charlotte Region Restores, where donations of furniture are sold to build homes. Donations accepted at cltregionrestore.org/donate. And Camp North End, offering Class A office, dining, shopping, and outdoor amenities, located 1 mile north of Uptown on a 76-acre historic site. Leasing info at camp.nc. Extreme fire, smoke, and heat continue to ravage the West. Over 2 million acres have burned in California so far. And 20 minutes from now, 1A will head to the San Joaquin Valley to hear the latest on what's happening. And then conversation with cosmetologist cosmologist Katie Mack about her book, The End of Everything, and about how the universe works and how it could eventually come to an end. Well, that's a happy thought. That's coming up in 20 minutes at 10 o'clock on 1A, and we're coming right back with Mayor Vi Lyles. Stay with us.
It's your world. We help you explore it.
We travel next to England, where millions of students try to return to classrooms this week.
It's your community. We help you understand it.
With 2 months before the 2020 election, 618,000 people have requested mail ballots, says the state's elections director, Karen Brinson Bell.
WFAE's Morning Edition is an essential way to start your day and stay connected to your world. Listen weekday mornings from 5 to 9 on 90.7 WFAE.
It's Charlotte Talks on WFAE and WFHE. I'm Mike Collins. We're talking today with Mayor Vi Lyles about a number of topics. And right now we're talking about the health and welfare of businesses and individuals who are suffering greatly in Charlotte and around the country because of the COVID-19 closure of many of those businesses, particularly the hospitality industry and music venues, which you referred to a moment ago, Mayor. In August, at the end of August, the city's economic development department was finishing up a campaign to uplift the hospitality industry. I think you referred to this a moment ago. It includes an awareness campaign to encourage people to support their favorite establishments, relief grants, and a ramped up streetery, streetery push to encourage outdoor dining. It's partially a result of the city council's approving $8 million from the $50 million small business and workforce training program to help restaurants and hotels. That's underway. Are there more efforts underway?
I think all of those things are being done, but I want to talk about the streetery effort.
Okay.
We kind of smile at the word, but it's very important because, as you know, the standards for COVID and 2.5 allows for a lot more outdoor dining, and we're allowing restaurants to move out into streets, sidewalks, so that we can create their opportunities. The marketing campaign is to say, this is what you can do. You can come in, you can pick up, you can eat outdoors. But the real answer to this is the 5 million that we would do for restaurants that need to be able to reconfigure to meet what I think is a long-term need to battle against COVID, so that they can get more people inside, but they do it within the guidelines. Our hotels are impacted, and we've allocated $3 million. We're in discussions with the hotel industry about how best that money might be utilized. Particularly, I think there are over 160 hotels in our city, and some are doing fine and some are not. So how do we work to make sure that we're helping people that need the help most, and doing that? But we're also looking at the music venues where, the best thing about a good music venue is a big crowd at the front and a lot of really good music coming out of it.
Let me ask you about that, because the New York
Yeah.
Times has an article this morning that says jazz lives in clubs, and when the clubs are closed, the music dies. And we had this plea for help from Charlotte music venues. Not all of them, I think only one of them is involved in jazz. They're involved in all types of music, and they're dying because they're not allowed to open. Last night, in Winston-Salem, the President of the United States held a rally. It was outdoors, I will give it that, but there were hundreds of people there. I don't believe that's legal in North Carolina at the moment. How does he get away with it, but music venues can't?
And Mike, you know how he gets away with it. He's the president. I don't understand.
Well, if we are a country of laws and the president can do what he damn well pleases, why can't music venues open? Why can't the Verizon amphitheater open and have people in there?
Because
Law
we
be
care.
damned.
While the president may not care about his audiences, we care about the people in this city, in this country, this county. I don't have an answer. There's no answer to this, except to say, if you really want to have something and you want to disobey the rules and all of that, go ahead, but know that you're putting many, many other people at risk, and that's not what we're going to do. Government, we're trying to help our businesses, whether they be from the hair salon to the music venue. We're trying to help them do right so that we can get through this. That's that's what we do here.
So, what are we doing for these music venues? Is there a plan yet, or are we talking about formulating a plan to help some of these organizations weather this storm because they're on the verge of collapse, according to them?
So, I think one of the best things about the Charlotte City Council is the diversity that we have. And we have some people that are very, very engaged with the music industry, very, very engaged with the arts organizations, very, very engaged on opportunity corridors where we need to be. And we have people that are now in a discussion. The music venues have organized, and now we are working with council members that are organized to learn more and bring back ideas. So I expect that we'll be seeing something about the venues. These are things, when we started out, we thought if we would help small businesses, if we would keep people in their houses from being evicted. But there are things that come out, just like you talked about the schools' Wi-Fi efforts. When we started all of this, there was no idea what the schools would do. Now we know that we need hotspots for over 16,000 kids in our school system. And we're going to participate in that because that is the right thing to do. When we get plans and people bring us ideas, I did not think about the hotels, but we had a group of the hotel industry folks come in and say, we are not going to make it for 2 years and we may fail before then. So how do you help us? Have a big plan, but be flexible enough to adjust to the most important needs. Our kids, our hotels, our music venues, all of those things have come up and we've been responsive to them. And the city council dives deeply into it and they make it happen.
So last night, the city council proposed, city manager Marcus Jones proposed using $1 million of the CARES Act funding, of which I think we got, $50 million, to provide Wi-Fi access spots to CMS students. Did councils say yes to that?
The council did say yes to that.
So what will $1 million get us?
$1 million will be combined with $2 million from the Charlotte Mecklenburg School Foundation and $1 million raised by the private sector and the city's million for CARES and from the CARES funding. And what we will get is $4 million to support students that need hotspots that currently don't have them for remote learning.
I want to bring something. I want to go back to the president in a second. Right now, as a matter of fact, he held that rally in Winston-Salem. It was outdoors. Do you know what the rule is at the moment in the state of North Carolina for outdoor gatherings? How many people can be in one place at one time? Do you know?
My understanding is that 2.5 allows for 50 people outside. As a gathering.
So David Tepper, the owner of the Panthers, is a little frustrated, but also understanding about the prohibition of having fans in the stands. I think their first game is Sunday, and there won't be anybody in the stands. How much of a blow will that be economically to Charlotte? We know he's going to take a hit. What about Charlotte? Because all of that tailgating that goes on before and the dining afterward, et cetera, how big a blow, and parking lots, how big a blow will that be?
Well, we all know what happens when we have professional sports as a part of our hospitality industry. Basketball for the Hornets, having the Panthers. It is a major blow. It is absolutely something that people that, whether you're the church on the corner that sells hot dogs and does that, or whether or not you lease your parking lot for tailgating, and whether or not people feel like they can go to a bar afterwards and celebrate the win we're going to have on Sunday against the Las Vegas Raiders. I just think that we all understand that in this country, sports make a huge difference. They're part of our economy. And what I've heard Dave Tepper say is that this is going to be a year that he's going to be in the red on this. And we are going to follow again, working with the organization, working with the governor's administration and staff. Their next game, I believe, after this Sunday will be October.
Part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say part of the problem with people coming to grips with some of the things they're being asked to do and not do is the randomness of it. We are encouraging people to dine outdoors as long as there's fewer than 50 people in an enclosed dining area in an outdoor situation. David Tepper was looking to put 12,500 people into a 75,000 foot stadium. I did the math. That's about 17% capacity, and it is outdoors. Isn't that better than restaurants opening at 50% capacity and having people outdoor eating? Isn't it equivalent, or even isn't it better than that? Why can't he do it?
Well, first, I am not the public health director, and my concern is that we need to speak with both Dr. Cohen as well as Ms. Harris about how we look at this. There's something that's a little bit different in terms of how we work with what they call congregant groups. And so while you're in a restaurant, you're 6 foot separated, you're 2 or 4 or 6 people, you're there for a certain amount of time that you leave. When you have larger groups and they are together, but I believe first and foremost that the governor's administration is well aware of what's going on, but even more importantly, the NFL is more aware of what's going on. And just like the NBA has the bubble, I think that there'll be some discussions between the national organization and the various governors across the footprint for the NFL to make some determination about what works, and particularly what works in individual stadiums.
I think there are 3 teams that are playing with fans in the stands this weekend.
My understanding is that you may be correct. I'm going to say that I've been told that we will not have fans on the first games for, I think, the NFL, but the idea is to have a plan that we can move forward on. And I hope that that happens. And I hope that it's led by the NFL working with the governors across the country.
I want to move on to something that people don't understand, that I don't understand, and maybe you do understand it. You can shed some light on it. I had a bunch of questions about the ethics review that 3 members of city council are under, and they've been under for a couple of weeks, that will be pushed out to an outside investigator. And then I read this morning that every single member of council is under some sort of ethics review. What is going on?
You know, I say this, God bless your heart, because I really can't figure this one out. I know that we have an ethics policy, and this ethics policy started several months ago. It was 3 people, then it went to 5, and now it's all 12. And it's because of a section of our ethics policy that allows for any citizen to basically make a statement, and even though the statement may have absolutely no truth to it, they have the ability to write that. And some of the policies that, or some of the complaints that have been filed by citizens go back to grievances that they've had for 6 years. Some of them are grievances that they've had for a couple of months. And these ethics violations, our standard was created when we were having a violation that was a sexual harassment investigation. And the bar that was set for a citizen is just basically fill out the form, write your complaint, and then that makes it valid for a further review. Last night, the council basically said is that we needed to have a filter by an outside counsel that would say, here's the form, here's what's been submitted. Is there merit to this form before going into and spending many, many dollars on an investigation going forward? So we'll have more to say about that in the next several weeks.
So is this a situation of, this started with 3, first at 1, then 3 council members, and that these are all copycat suits, or is this a concerted political effort to cast shade on members of council? What is happening here? Because this seems to me to be unusual.
It is unusual. We've had this policy for over 5 years, and we've never had real complaints like this. I have been included by a complaint that I did not fulfill the public records law. And it's just, that's all it took. And so I'm just like the other 11 members that you've elected are all under this policy. I believe that when Ed Driggs, who leads the Effective Government Committee, will be taking a look at the policy and will look at everything that we've done and do it in the context of making sure that we meet the ethics requirements of the state and for our own ethics, but we also make it possible that to be treated fairly and to be talked about with truth.
Well,
And
City
not-
Council, City Attorney Patrick Baker has expressed unease over the current standards, and City Council member Victoria Watlington says the policy is, quote, severely lacking for a city of this size and appears to be subpar versus every other city and town in this state. So what you're saying is you'll be taking a look at this and reforming. Is the council the body to reform ethics rules that govern the council?
Well, we've done it once. I don't know that we feel like we would have to approve. I mean, it's our ethics policy. We are going to have to adopt something, but how we work with people that are particularly in this area of expertise will be important, and they'll inform the process and the product.
We have 30 seconds left. RNC, big to do, not so big to do, 336 people. It's come, it's gone, it's over. Some of them wore masks, some of them did not. There's been some COVID outbreaks as a result. Considering everything that's gone on, are you happy about what happened there? And are you happy that it's over? I have 15 seconds.
I am glad that we tried to do something but I also am really glad that we were able to react and change. We're flexible. We do our very best. And I'm glad that the Republicans had the committee meeting that they wanted. And now we're on to the election on November the 3rd.
And I wish I had time to ask you about the safety of the mail-in ballot. That's not really your purview, but lucky for you, we're out of time.
Just get it in, vote, get it in there.
Thank you for the hour.
Thank you very
Charlotte
much.
Talks with Mike Collins is a production of 90.7 WFAE. Support for Charlotte Talks comes from Mazda of South Charlotte and Fifth Third Bank. Our executive producer is Wendy Herkey. The senior producer is Aaron Keever. The producer is Chris Miller. Our assistant producer is Jesse Steinmetz. Jennifer Warsham is our production assistant, and our engineer is Joby Sprinkle. For more information about